Hello, everyone. Welcome to Word Wednesday. Jeffrey Nance here with you. Today's topic is going to be a little uncomfortable. So, we're actually going to talk about a topic that I would say is fairly popular, mainly because of the incorrect interpretation that many apply to it. So before we start off, I want to go ahead and let you know what our topic of discussion is going to be. I suspect some of you guys are going to be like, check you later. Just because of the topic, you're not going to like it. You're going to be like, I don't want to listen to that. I would encourage you, stick around though. Stick around whether you're listening with us live or whether you're listening to this later. Hear me out. Hear the whole thing out, because that's going to be the key. It's good for us as believers to understand the word, to really think through the word, and then to properly apply the word. So today's topic is going to be on judging. Judging, yes, that ever popular topic there. Now, the mere mention of that, some of you guys are like, oh, great. What is he going to say about judging? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at some common passages in the Bible, and we're going to point out some things that you probably have missed, or maybe many people around you have missed, and at the very least misunderstood or didn't even know that they are actually in the Bible. So let me start off by saying this. I think that as believers, not just I think, all right, I know from reading the word that we are a people that are supposed to be like Jesus, and that as a whole, as often as we can, we ought to be encouraging. We ought to be trying to lift others up. There are numerous passages that talk about that. In no way should we be a people that are constantly going around looking for negative things, pointing those out. That's not what today is about. However, there is a real void in our society because Satan and the demons and principalities and whatnot have allowed people, believers, sadly enough, to be led astray by doing what he does. The thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Jesus said, I've come that you might have life and have it abundantly. And one of the things that Satan and his minions do well is they take portions of Scripture and then twist them. They either leave something out, they don't finish the whole thing, or they allow us to have a segment of it and then to think that somehow that small segment is the main focus of it. And I think that's what we're going to see today that's happened with many of these passages. So let's start with Matthew chapter 7. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Okay, pretty straightforward there, right? I mean, it seems to indicate do not judge or you'll be judged. In the same way that you judge others, you'll be judged. And with the measure you use, it'll be measured against you. All right, so now most people just, they take that and they go, okay, see, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't judge people. But if we stop reading there, we would miss out an important part of the rest of this passage. Why do you, still talking to the same people, it's the very next verse, look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. If any of you guys have ever had something in your eye, you didn't sit there and just think, well, this feels good. No, I'm fine. I mean, it's not a problem. I mean, yeah, it could scratch my eye and mess me up, and it does hurt and it's painful, but I don't mind it. I barely even notice it. No way. No way. When you have something in your eye, you'll like grab your eyelid and you'll like pull it down below your chin, trying to get your eye to water to flush this thing out. So let's reevaluate what this passage is really saying. The focus isn't on whether or not we should be getting sawdust out of somebody else's eye. We should. We should clearly be doing that. But it does say that we need to remove that massive plank that's in our eye first, because I can't see clearly how to take the sawdust out of your eye if there's a massive plank in my eye that's keeping me from getting close enough to actually see it and to go in there and actually help you out. This passage isn't saying don't remove the sawdust. You should remove the sawdust. You should be willing to help out other people. That sawdust is going to be irritating to them. Yes, it needs to be removed. But in order to really help that person with their sawdust, you have to make sure that you've taken that big 2x4 out of your own eye so that you can see clearly how to help remove the sawdust from their eye. And so when he says, you know, with the same amount that you have measured to others, it'll be measured against you. Well, guys, if you're sitting out there with the big 2x4 and you're basically looking at somebody else with some sawdust going, you've got an issue here in this area of your life. Oh, and by the way, I know mine is more obvious and even bigger, but let me help you. It's not going to be well received. But if I've removed that from my life, and now I can say to this other person, look, I know where you are. I have a sense of what that's like. Here's what I did to remove this area in my life so that I could improve, so that I could get rid of that sawdust, that irritant. Here's what I did to get rid of that, and maybe doing something similar could help you. Now, if you were to be judged because of that approach, you'd be willing to do that because you would say, look, I'm applying the same measure. Yeah, that's fine. But if I'm actively doing something, let's just say that I struggle with being on time, I'm probably the worst person to go to somebody else and be like, I can't believe you're late. That was really rude of you to be late, to make all of us wait on you when I'm notoriously late myself. That's very hypocritical. You'll notice that's the word that Jesus uses here. You hypocrites, why didn't you take that plank out of your own eye first? Well, now let's flip over here to Romans. And if we were to read in Romans, we might come to a similar conclusion. So let's do that. You therefore have no excuse, you who pass judgment on someone else. Well, I just stopped reading there. Again, I could make a point that Christians just shouldn't never judge at all. But that's not where the verse ends. You therefore have no excuse, you who pass judgment on someone else, for at whatever point you judge the other, you are condemning yourself. And then watch this. Verse still goes on. Because you who pass judgment do the same things. That's the issue. That's the issue. Paul is saying to these folks, you're not in a position to pass judgment because you do the same thing, you big old hypocrite. Verse 2, now we know that God's judgment against those who do such things is based on truth. So when you, a mere man, pass judgment on them and yet do the same things, do you think you will escape God's judgment? You see what's happening here, guys? We take these little segments and then we go, oh, I can't point out what somebody else is doing wrong. I can't point out sin in their life because I've got sin in my own life. The point here that has been made in both passages that people misunderstand is the hypocrisy. If you are a liar, you are not the one that needs to go to somebody else and be like, I think you should stop lying. That doesn't resonate with them. They're going to look at you and be like, sure, right after you do. Both of you need to stop. Somehow we have this idea that we can't approach somebody who's sinning because we have some sin in our life. Guys, if you're on trial for murder, but you haven't murdered anybody, and you have a righteous judge, you don't have anything to be concerned about. It is absolutely okay for you to point out to somebody, hey, you really shouldn't murder people. If you're sitting there going, hey, all right, I'm going to address this issue. Hey, you're disobedient to your parents. It's very clear that you need to obey your parents unless they're trying to, have you commit some kind of sin, that you need to obey your parents. Well, if I'm actively doing that, then that's great. Let me go approach another person that's not, point that out to them. But if I am a disobedient, it's not me that needs to approach them. I got a plank in my own eye. I got to get rid of it first. How can I help them with their disobedience if I'm still doing it myself? And then finally, we have this passage here, which most people either have never read or never really understood, but I think it's fascinating. And it's the end of chapter 5 here in 1 Corinthians. I have written you in my letter not to associate with sexually immoral people. Not at all mean the people of this world who are immoral, or the greedy and swindlers or idolaters. In that case, you would have to leave this world. But now I'm writing that you must not associate with anyone who calls himself a brother, but is sexually immoral, or greedy, or an idolater, or a slanderer, or a drunkard, or a swindler. With such a man, do not even eat. So what's the key here? Anyone who claims to be a brother, anyone who claims to be a believer and is actively engaged in sinful, ongoing behaviors. Paul says, do not even eat with that person. If they claim to be a brother, if they claim to be a believer, and they are actively engaged in ongoing sinful lifestyles, do not even eat with that person. And then check this verse out. What business is it of mine to judge those outside the church? Are you not to judge those inside? God will judge those outside. Expel the wicked man from among you. So again, here we have Paul addressing the Corinthian church, going, guys, you have to address sinful, ongoing behavior. And if someone claims to be a brother, someone claims to be a believer, and they are living a perpetually sinful lifestyle, then yes, we ought to address that. And to not do so is not loving. In fact, it's the opposite. Because the Bible is clear in saying, look, you got a speck in your eye, remove it. If somebody is living a lifestyle that is counter to Jesus, Paul says, expel that brother from the church until he is convicted and repents of his sin, changes his lifestyle, and comes back and desires the fellowship of the church again. Now, guys, I want you to understand, we don't need to be people that are constantly going around pointing out everything everybody's doing wrong. But then again, if our goal is to make people better, somebody's doing something wrong, maybe we should be more open to that being done in the right way. I will say this, the Bible does tell us that we should still try to approach each other in love. And that's why you need to make sure that your heart is right. But if somebody is clearly living a sinful lifestyle and they claim to be a believer, the next time they say, judge not lest you be judged, say, listen, in this area, I'm not guilty. But brother, you are. And I want you to be more like Jesus. I want you to be a good representative of him. And if you need me to help, there's no 2x4 in my eye when it comes to this area. I can help you. I can help you find somebody else if you feel like maybe that would resonate more with you. But we've got to get this fixed. This is an area of your life where you can't constantly be living in sin this way. It doesn't glorify Christ. And I want to have fellowship with you, but Paul was very clear that I can't. So I want you to repent. I want you to change this behavior. Don't you want to fix this thing in your life? I do, brother. I'm coming to you, and I want it. And you do this out of love, guys. And again, it's not like we're actively going around looking for people, find areas to point out that they're doing wrong. That's not what we're trying to do. But when something becomes obvious and there is clear sin in another person's life, then we have an obligation as believers to point that out to them, as long as our heart is right first. All right, guys. So I know it's a tough word. It's probably not a word that you've heard. Probably haven't looked at those passages the same. But you'll notice it's all about the hypocrisy. Okay? We're not supposed to be a people that are mean-spirited and judgmental, but we are supposed to be a people who point people towards Christ and point out when that's not happening. And when there are areas of their lives that need adjustment, that need to be fixed, and that we need to be there to help them, come alongside of them and encourage them. So let's do that. Let's be a people that understand the word. For far too long, we've let this idea of sinful, ongoing lifestyles permeate the church, and we're weaker because of it. We just are. And there's a reason for that. Paul was very clear. Who am I to judge those outside the church? Ultimately, God's going to do that. But those inside the church, if there are people that are living in consistent sinful lifestyles, we can't be okay with that. We have to point that out in a loving way. And you can go to Matthew 5 and see other ways to approach that. But it's in there, guys. It's in there over and over and over again. And we have a responsibility to do this as believers, because ultimately our goal is to look more like Jesus and to behave more like him. He was not a hypocrite, but he did point out to people. Go back and think about it. How many times when Jesus was dealing with somebody who was doing something sinful were his last words to them not, go and sin no more? You see that often. Why did he say that? He had healed them, but he said, look, you were living lifestyles. I want you to go and sin no more. Jesus was never shy about pointing out people's areas where they needed to change. Yes, he would talk to them, he would heal them, but then he said to them, go and sin no more. It's always got to be about that follow-up. It was for Jesus, needs to be for us, those of us that are part of his bride, the church. Well, guys, thanks for being on with us. Shanti, thank you. I'm glad this resonates with you. Let's be a people that understand the word and that are willing to point it out. It says the problem often is that we are less than perfect, that we feel no matter what we may be led to point out in someone else's life, we know we'll end up tit for tat. Well, listen, tell that person, thank you for pointing that out. You know what? That's an area I didn't see. You talk about shocking somebody. If you go to them and say, hey, here's an area I think you need to improve, and they say, well, what about this in your life? Go, thank you for pointing that out. Can you help me with this area of my life? Because I guess I didn't even notice that it was an issue. Now, that'll blow them away. But don't just assume that because somebody pointed out something that you are doing wrong, that means you need to stop the conversation. That's just shifting blame. Say to that person, thank you. Let's work on that together. By the way, let me help you work on this area too. So it doesn't need to be that it shuts things down. If they point out something else that you're doing, evaluate whether or not there's truth in that, because maybe God is using that encounter to point out an area of your life where you've been a little blind, and that perhaps that's an opportunity for you to grow as well. And if we really are truly loving each other, trying to make each other better, then perhaps both of us walk away from that conversation with a desire to make improvements in our life and to stop sinning in certain areas. So that's your word for today, guys. If you want to share this with folks, let them know. We have these various platforms that are available. Again, the word is living and active. It's powerful. And when we allow it, it penetrates. It gets even between bone and marrow, and that's a good thing. But we've got to be willing to listen to it and then do what it says, even when it wants us to do really hard things. But that's what Christians are called to do. All right, guys. Thanks for being a part of it today. If you have any other questions, let us know. Thanks for being a part of this. Please share it with others. And let's be a people that love, but also a people that approach those in sin and are willing to say, let me help you with this, brother or sister in Christ. And let's go from there. All right. Thanks. See you next time.